Okay, Mike's speech. The objectives are to conduct a successful television interview, to understand the dynamics of a successful television interview or talk show, to prepare questions to ask during the interview program, and to present a positive, confident image on the television camera. So tonight, we are joining an in-progress taping of Power Set Chat with our host, Mike Carr. Our guest tonight is Dr. Peter MacMillan, a Toastmasters Advanced Communicator Bronze and competent leader. Peter is a faculty member and chair in the School of Education at UNBC. He is a former school teacher and a 15-year professor veteran of UNBC. He continually struggles to say anything meaningful in only 10 minutes. Please join me in welcoming Peter MacMillan.
Peter, thanks for joining us this evening. We appreciate you taking time for us. But let's start at the start. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a 2-room log cabin, several miles up from a small lake, 6 miles up from the smallest city in Canada, Greenwood, BC.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
One brother a year younger and a baby sister while I was still up there.
Did you have any pastimes or hobbies as a child that you can recall?
Well, at that age, under 6, I can remember, strangely enough, I wanted to be a grader operator. Because, of course, that's something that came by the house, that's what I saw. My brother was 1 year younger, so he had to take second choice. He could be a dump truck operator. So that was part of our sense of the world. My father was a carpenter, did some side work in the small town, but my early years I spent up in that 2-room log cabin with my poor mother all day with nothing to do but take care of young children while my father went into town to work or up to his workshop.
So that being said then, what was your first job? What did you end up doing?
What was my first job? Actually, I followed some of my first job was actually with Inland Natural Gas, digging ditches, putting dirt back on top of pipes, putting natural gas into Midway. This was quickly followed by my second job for the second month, which was my father's long-time job with the CPR, taking care of the bunkhouse. So humble beginnings, taking oil out of locomotives, sopping it up with rags, cleaning up the bunkhouse after the train crews had come in, overnighted, spent far too much time in the pub, and left evidence of it for me before traveling back on the train the next day. So I've done that kind of work. I'm proud of where I've come from, and I appreciate people that do that work still.
So we know that you started in Midway and you eventually ended up in Prince George as a university professor. So what happened between point A and point B, at least in terms of work? Let's start with that.
Well, the thing that I knew that I didn't want to do was work in a sawmill the rest of my life. I knew that a small town was not going to be a particularly happy place for me, and I liked school. So I went off to college, then off to university, first Selkirk College in Castlegar, then the big city of Vancouver. Spent time there, got the degree in chemistry, didn't know what I was going to do, went back, worked in the sawmill for a year. So I was really convinced I didn't want to work in the sawmill. Realized I would have acquired some addiction problems in order to keep working there. Just at that time thought that I liked people, I liked science, maybe I'd like being a teacher. So I went back to Vancouver, did my teaching degree, and how did I get up here? Well, there wasn't much in the way of job counseling in those days. I looked at a map of the province, been in a number of places I didn't want to live, like the Fraser Valley, like the Kootenays, but I'd seen it all. I'd never noticed Highway 16 before, I'd never been north of Kamloops, so I applied along Highway 16, ended up in Burns Lake, and the rest is history.
Wow, that is one. Is there any part of the province that you haven't spent time in?
Looked at a map of the province, been in a number of places I didn't want to live, like the Fraser Valley, like the Kootenays, but I'd seen it all. I'd never noticed Highway 16 before. I'd never been north of Kamloops. So I applied along Highway 16, ended up in Burns Lake, and the rest is history.
Wow, that is one. Is there any part of the province that you haven't spent time in?
No. I've recently come down through the northern BC piece. I've gone up through Dease Lake. Haven't been to Haida Gwaii. That's the notable place in the province I have not spent any time in yet.
So, do you have any advice that you would give to a new student graduating, say, at this point? You know, given your history, given what you've seen, you've done the basic low-end jobs, so to speak, you've done the other end of things in post-secondary. What advice would you give somebody just graduating school right now?
Well, I realize I've been quite shaped by my father, someone who grew up during the Depression. So, in one sense, any job that pays you and you can go to the next day is a good job. And you should get out there and get on with it. That in his generation, the idea of being fulfilled in a job or being interested in a job might have been the furthest from his mind. It was whether or not he could feed his family, whether or not there was some rudimentary dental plan or pension, or whether or not he was going to really get hurt on the job or not. That's what counted. Now, I confess I bring some of that when I see younger people today, that some of my own children, for example, one at home mentioning no names, that he's into a new job here, a really great job, and he's not quite sure he's excited yet. He needs to be excited, he wants to be fulfilled, he wants to be interested. What are they going to do to entertain him tomorrow? And so I admit that I have that bit of trouble. So for young people, just get out there and do it, and when you've done something for a couple of years, figure out whether you want to be there or figure out how you're going to get somewhere else you'd rather be, but just get on with it.
There's an old comment about job fulfillment that is basically, if you had enough money to retire at this moment, would you keep doing the job? So if you had the money to do it right this second, if you could just shut it down, quit doing your work with UNBC, would you?
I think not. Retirement is going to be an issue for me in that I don't know what I'd really rather be doing. I'm quite happy. I work too many hours. Toastmasters is something that forces me to get away from the job, even though I can see all the connections with it, so I'm not totally away. It gives me some travel, it gives me some interesting challenges. And although I love my cappuccino bars, that if that was the only thing in the day, if that was my highlight, I'm not quite ready for that yet.
One last question about work-related things. If you had to look back on it right now, what would you say your greatest professional achievement has been?
The greatest professional achievement? I think it's more a string of mentoring other younger scholars, particularly people at the master's level, people that are making changes in their lives, people that are seeing other things and moving forward. And the fact that these people are generally female as well, where there can be a change, a light goes on in terms of what they really can be compared to what they used to do, and being respected for that is, I think, really the greatest achievement.
So we heard earlier in the night that you met your wife in Burns Lake. How long have you been married?
We got married in 1976, so you're a math geek.
34 years roughly.
Very good.
Right. So how did you meet your wife? Was there any kind of a story to it?
It was a small town in Burns Lake. There are groups of professionals. If you're male, you're either a high school teacher or a forester. If you're a female, you're a nurse or an elementary school teacher. My wife came out working for the Catholic school system, which was elementary, and so the chairperson of the school board knew right away she had to entertain all these young females or they weren't going to be around in year 2. So she arranged a party in her house and invited the high school teachers. And that was the start.
And I believe you have kids. How many kids do you have?
I have 3.
Great. And would you, speaking as a as a soon-to-be father myself, do you find that having kids changes your perspective on life?
Of course it does, a great deal. I find now that they're adult children, the perspective changes again, and although I have no particular eagerness to become a grandfather because that pushes them into another stage of their lives, that I'm getting some of those thoughts about what didn't I do right, what did I miss with the kids that I had. I heard another speaker recently talking about the success in the career and then the children not spending time with you or you with them, and that kind of point hit home, as it probably does for any parent with a challenging career.
All right, so let's close with one classic last question. If you could change any event in your life, would you? And what event?
Well, there's a number of cliches out of counseling, the coulda, woulda, shouldas, and that's an indication that you're supposed to avoid that kind of thinking. So no planning on fixing, like every other normal human being. There are a number of events that I would change and a number that I wouldn't even dare to tell you about. But I can't change them, I can't fix them, I can only move forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us tonight. Peter MacMillan.